Hello, my name is Greg Braun. I'm with Cognex Duluth. I am giving an online session here using the Insight Explorer 4.1 EasyBuilder. This will be another succession in sessions, and this will be involving the counting tool. First slide we have here will be outline of the objectives. We will determine which tools best features lend themselves to the five counting tools. We have several of them to look through and go over. The use of some of the counting tools, describe the use of those, learn a definition of a blob. First time we've encountered the blob in these sessions. And start defining the use of the smart limits with the counting tools, show us how that works. And we'll just inspect a simple part. Basically where we're going with this, if I can share an application with you, this will be the Insight Explorer right here, and we happen to be looking at a tool right here counting these LEDs on this camera. As you see up right here is passing, and as we flip this board, we're on the fail side, and you'll notice we only have two blobs here counting these LEDs on the back of the camera case. And yes, that's out of the range, and thus we get a fail status. And so we'll be going through this class here and learning how to configure this software to be able to do that. Let me take us back to our slides here, but that's our end where we're going to. So let me go ahead and get back to these slides. So that will be inspecting the sample part here using a blob tool. What we'll be doing, as I described in that demo, was we'll be looking at the LEDs on the side of the case right here and determining whether the three are there or if one of the LEDs is missing. And the EasyBuilder Smart Features will determine what the range is by coming up with three blobs. And if there are not three blobs over here, there is one missing. Some other applications out there are counting holes, counting the number of screws in these brackets here, counting some bracket mounts here again on this with holes. So these are easy tools to be implemented with, the tool is easily implemented on this type of application to determine whether they have the holes here. The tools we'll be looking at are in the counting tool group here. So we'll be working today with verifying presence and assembly of parts. So what we have here then are the blobs themselves. We can also look at edges for presence, absence of edges, and also presence of patterns. So this is all under the counting tools group here with the added tool under counting, blobs, edges, and patterns. So these are the tool groups that are comprised of the counting tools. We'll select the blob tool when we get into the example. Again, I'll go through that example and start it from scratch and build it for you. When we start the tools, we select our group counting tools, select blob, and we'll add it. And we also have a description of what we are expected to do in order to enable that tool to work. So in EasyBuilder, we have that structure built for us. Once we have the tool opened, there'll be some tabs here formulated for us, a Generals tab, Settings tab, and Range Limits. First one is in the other tools. We can rename the tool. It'll come up with a count _1 type tool or blobs _1 tool. We will fixture this tool. That's the first thing we learned in our sessions when we started EasyBuilder, and to turn it on in the execution time. These are all the same processes that we had learned before in the other sessions. The settings tabs are where they start to vary a little bit. Here we're having a threshold. We can auto function it, or we can manually select the threshold through here if we hit manual. The blob colors, we have two. It's a binary tool, meaning two So it is either white or black. We also have something called the boundary blobs, which I can show you in the example when we get to our sample application. Boundary blobs are if the blob is touching the search box area. If this box is not checked, it will not be counted. If this box is checked, if the blob is touching that search area, it will be counted. And this is the minimum and maximum area that the blobs are to be counted. Another parameter that we have, this tab right here, range limits. This again is automatically done for us. This is called a smart limit. What it will do is it will count the blobs that you tried to learn and say there were 3 of them. So that is the minimum and maximum numbers that you will have in the blob count. When it is 3, then will pass. When it is any number other than 3, it will not pass. We also provide an invert checkbox here, which it will reverse this order. If anything other than 3 were here, it would then still pass, and this one would fail. Let's go ahead then on the next section, on the next slide. We also here have a graph that will help us determine what we are seeing. If you look very closely here in the slide, we have a line here at the 255 range. We are looking for white blobs in our example, and these are the blobs that we're trying to find. They have a very high value. This right here are dark blobs determined by our threshold. Anything to the left of this threshold is a dark blob. Anything to the right of this threshold is a light blob. And here we have a group of colored grayscale, black, dark blobs in about the range, probably around 50 on the grayscale. These are around probably 254, 253, right up here. So this is the graph that can help us understand what the tool is doing. We have the grayscale down here, and this is the number of pixels that are indicated. Here we have less than probably 50 or 100 pixels at this peak level, but they're a combination of all this area right here. So again, right here we go all the way up to 450 for a single group, and then we have more pixels in that white blob area. So those are the parameters that came with it. We also move over here into the actual application. We need to fixture the part, which is indicated over here by positioning. The first thing we learn to do when we're using tools is to fixture it first, so if this part moves, whatever tool we have inspecting this will also move with it. So to add the blobs, you merely click on the blobs tool, hit add, or double click if you so desire, and this will add a search box in your field of view. And then it is up to you to determine what you want it to look at. And we, of course, moved it over here to our LEDs because that is what we're trying to indicate whether they're present or not, and using the blob tool to do that. And here we go again with another example of that. Here is the search box that we reconfigured around those LEDs, and we have 0 through 1, or actually 0 through 2, usually from the largest to the smallest blob, which is indicating we have 3 blobs here, and that's our minimum maximum. So we do have a pass condition in our results tab over here in our palette. So this is determined by the number of blobs we found in the search area, by the search criteria, white blobs versus black blobs, and determined by certain size restrictions. So the result is passing with 3. This is the breakout of that pattern right here. We can show you some other functions too as we go along, but let's talk about what actually a blob is. So what a blob can do for us is, let's see if we can get this diagram. There we go. Definition of a blob. If any corner or side of a pixel is touching another pixel of like intensities, it will be considered part of that blob. If it is not touching, then it will be considered another part of the blob, or another blob, or it could be considered the background. As we have here in this image right here, we have blobs equal 2. This one only equals 1, although you and I would say, yeah, it's probably 2 blobs. But we can see right here that several pixels of the similar intensities, meaning either black or white, are touching at least by one side, and that means they are touching, so they are considered just one blob. They don't have any geometry. They don't happen to have any shape. That's our patterns tools will accommodate that for counting. These are just merely finding groups of pixels of similar intensities, meaning either above the threshold or below the threshold, touching at least by one side or even one corner, because to every square box we have 4 sides and 4 corners, is considered that part of the blobs. Another way to refer to them is binary large objects. For whatever reason, they are binary because they are 2, either black or white. And not necessarily large objects, but it's a good way to remember what it is. Our scale is from 0 to 255 on the grayscale. And we do have that threshold, which I showed you with the graph. Again, I'm checking the question and the question board, the chat board there, for any questions that you might have, or those people that came on later on. If you have any questions during this, go ahead and speak up. I don't know if Dave has got his phone on or not, but I see he came into the session here a little bit ago. All right, if there's no questions to the chat or on the phone. Another application, as we described a little bit earlier here, we're looking at a bracket here for the holes. We see here by the cross indicator that we have a locator type tool on here, probably a pattern tool. And we see down here we have a search area looking for 2 of these bracket holes right here. And our blob count comes up as 2. In the next image here, in the next slide, search area moved. If the bracket had moved, this would translate this to this search box right here and move it. And it's indicated we only have 1 blob there, so it is failing because 2 was what it was expecting to see in there. Okay. So let's take a look at our actual software in the Insight Explorer. I'm going to go over here to a share slide to begin this with you. And that was the demo that I had started out with right here with this. I'm going to go ahead and start out with a new product. And so I'm going to clear all this data. It's going to go back to probably a darker image. Yeah, we're doing pretty good there. So what I want to do is make sure when you do these applications, you start out with a path image, because these smart limits will use what you find as the count. So if we had created the tool with the failed side, it would have counted 2 as a pass condition, and you would have to go in and change it. As it stands, we've got this right here with setup image. Let's go ahead and set this up. I want to put camera continuous, and I could brighten it up a little bit. There we go. And go to live video and straighten it out a bit. All right, let's see how that does. So the first thing I'm going to do just quickly, because these are things we learned in the other sessions, which you can go online and learn these tools also. I'm going to add a max pattern to our label up here, Cognix, for my locator, because as this moves, it will then translate its information to the other tools as I put them on here. So there we have a locator tool. Change. As you notice up here, it did change. And I'm going to go down to my Inspect Parts. And we're getting to the counting tool right now. So I expand the counting tool, blobs, edges. These are all the different ways we can count. I'll be using the blob tool right now. Go ahead and add the blob tool. Again, we have that search box to move over to indicate what we want to find. This is basically what I'm looking for, is those 3 LEDs. So I'm going to say OK. And through Smart Limits, it's going to try and figure out what you want to look for. And right now our range limits is 0, so obviously it hasn't found anything. I don't get any indicators here that we have found the blobs, because it probably doesn't know what it's looking for. So let's take a look at our settings. Well, first thing, let's call it our LEDs. And our settings are auto. We're looking for either. Let's go ahead and look for white blobs. And change our number here from 100 to 50. And yes, we did find them because they were smaller than 100 in pixel area. And the LEDs show, yes, we have 3 out of range. Because as I said, if we had learned it on a failed part, it would have made 2. But here it did not find any, so it came up with 0 as the pass count. So let's go ahead and change that to 3. And our minimum 3. And now we have a pass condition with this. And as we go online here, yes, this is passing. As we turn it over to the other side, and as you see it moves, no, we have some LEDs that aren't passing because it is a little bit out of alignment here. And I can easily open up the box a wee bit here. Yes, we come up with 2, and it is out of range. So we'll go ahead and pass this back to the pass side. And here we have our 3, and it has passed. That is basically how you use the counting tool and the blobs. You'll have to go into the Inspect Tools here, General tab, change this to whatever specific name you want it. In Settings, you will have to probably change this to what blob you're trying to find, but again, that could be auto-done for you. In looking at the size, they default to 100. These blobs happen to be a little bit smaller than 100. I think one of them is around 90 or 88, and they are definitely smaller than 100, so we changed that number down to 50. We could do another example for those people if they care to see that. I don't see any questions on that from anyone, but we're certainly welcome to take a look at those. I will just do another one here in Inspect Part using the counting tools and blobs. I'll add another, and I'll try and count these pinholes right here for the pin bracket here. Let's see what we come up with a count here. Comes up with 3. It came up with this round area right here, so we'll have to go ahead and draw that a little bit tighter in here. There we go. Let's see if we can change this to white. Since these are about half the size of those other ones, I'll probably start with 50 to see if that can get me results. I usually do divisions by 2. 50 did not. 25. Yeah, 25 was able to get me 8 pins right here, and of course it's out of range because it auto set itself to 3 the first time. So that is another example of using the blob tool, drawing it in here, again tweaking some of the settings, specifying I'm looking for the white blobs, not either, and lowering the minimum area to be able to pick up these smaller groups. of blobs. All right. I see there's no questions again on the board. Let me go back to the chat room and see what we have to offer there. All right, I see no questions on the whiteboard. Are there any questions on the phone? All right, then I will conclude this session. This is just basically the Insight Explorer 1.4 using the EasyBuilder feature to determine counting tools using the blob and counting LEDs on the back of the oops, sorry about that. And using the back of the camera right here to determine if there are LEDs present on the back of the camera. Well, if I don't have any questions on the chat board or the phone, this concludes the session on EasyBuilder Counting Tool. I thank you all for attending.